The Colts, I think, are a really interesting spot.
I've seen Seattle.
I mean, the only other team I could really think would be really interesting to make a move would be Carolina.
I mentioned it, Baker Mayfield. Now the new question becomes, because that was also thrown out around the same time, the teams are buzzing, was they might trade Baker, or Baker releases his kind of like a farewell or like a thank you Cleveland kind of post. And then I forget, I think the Browns said that they weren't going to trade him, and then this trade happens.
Well,
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
So the Browns were obviously, it was public knowledge they had met with Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, it was when they just met. Yeah.
And that's when Baker puts out the whole thank you Cleveland, but it wasn't like a farewell. It was like, I don't know like what's going to happen. Like I've put my heart and soul for this city, and like it's in God's hands now. That was basically what he said, which gives you the idea that like he kind of wants to stay, and but it's out of his hands. Then when Deshaun was ruled that he said that he didn't want to go to Cleveland, Baker demanded a trade after that. And then Cleveland said, no, we will not trade you, because obviously Deshaun had already ruled them out. So they're like, well, we need you to be our quarterback. And then Deshaun flips the script. So now Baker's probably going to get what he wants. But it was just a weird, I don't know, timing of everything. And then the wording that Baker had, then demanding a trade after that. It was strange.
Yeah. And so, yeah, obviously, like we mentioned, now Baker has to be traded. I mean, we assume Baker has to be traded. You can't just sit there and hold him. So, yeah, I mean, what are some spots? I think the Colts are the most popular spot. And you mentioned that Carolina trade, that Houston wanted a player. A little surprised that Baker was a piece to be traded. But nonetheless, where do you think he goes from here?
Like you said, the Colts, I think, are a really interesting spot, because the Colts are just they're in a weird place. The fact that they got rid of Carson Wentz, I think, was an emotional decision. And, you and I already talked about that one. And I don't think the options of like Jimmy G or Baker or anybody else doesn't get necessarily makes them better than what they were with Carson Wentz. If it does, it's minor. But I think because they've already committed and they got rid of Carson Wentz, they're in a spot where maybe Baker makes sense. He is younger than Carson Wentz, and he's younger than Jimmy G. So there's still potential that, maybe he's got some room to grow, because Baker did have a really good rookie season, and then he had a really good 2020, which maybe that was his rookie year. Anyway, last year, 2 years ago, he finished the year off pretty well, like the last 6 or so games. And so there was optimism going to last year. He was just dealing with injuries the whole time. So like, how much of the blame can we place on him versus the injury? So, I mean, there's still like potential for Baker to show, improvement and stuff, to where like maybe with Carson Wentz or Jimmy G, like they've had more time in the league, so we really just know what they are. Baker, we for the most part do, but I think that maybe a team like Indianapolis would prefer the upside that he could offer versus some of those other guys. If not Indianapolis, it's tough, because like obviously they're not, Pittsburgh's out of the running. They got Trubisky, and they're not going to send him to a division rival. The Buccaneers aren't really an option anymore because Tom Brady's back. So I can't see any other teams off the top of my head that feel like desperate to want to make the playoffs that Baker could maybe put them in that spot. But I don't know if you had any other options. I'm just thinking Indianapolis is really the main one.
I've seen Seattle, but once again, I think
they don't feel like a winning team.
And I think the key caveat is going to be what will be Cleveland's price tag. Like, what's going to be, where they draw the line in the sand, say, no, that's too little. Honestly, I think at this point, because of the situation, just in terms of price tag, once again, I'm just a guy that at home, I think it's like it got to be third or fourth round pick. It's hard to generate that much, I guess, buzz or interest. And like you mentioned, there's not a lot of places available.
Right.
And like I said, I think the best offer you're going to get, like you mentioned, is going to be Indy. They're a little bit desperate, because we've heard they mentioned that they might bring in Mariota, and Mariota's, he's not it. And I think Baker, you mentioned you compared him to Wentz and Jimmy G, which is probably the best that's left out there. I think he takes care of the ball a little bit better than them, and maybe has closer to Wentz's arm talent, so he can push the ball downfield. He does kind of come from a similar system in Cleveland, where they're gonna, it's gonna be a run first team, do a lot off the play action. So yeah, I think I think Indianapolis Colts are the best option. Maybe Seattle if maybe they want to swoop in, just send a fourth. I could see that. I'm trying to think.
I mean, the only other team I could really think would be really interesting to make a move would be Carolina, because
Carolina.
Darnold. Like, do you want to do that? Like, honestly, every other AFC team, like the whole AFC East, Mac Jones, Josh Allen, Tua, like Zach Wilson, none of those guys. He's not going to get traded within the division.
And the division's already set anyway at this point. Burrow, Lamar, and Trubisky.
Yeah. The Titans and Jags are out because Trevor Lawrence and Tannehill are better.
They just did deal with the Texans. He would have been a part of that.
Yeah, Texans aren't going to do that. So it's the Colts there. And then, like, the AFC West, all those quarterbacks are great. So, no, that's not happening. NFC East, they're all pretty set unless, like, you want to move off Daniel Jones. But they already signed Tyrod Taylor. So I just don't see that happening. I also don't see you trading Jalen Hurts for him, because I think Jalen Hurts still.
And now we have Gardner Minshew, who's like a little bit of a poor man's Baker for a much less price tag.
NFC North, Green Bay, Minnesota, no. Chicago, no. Detroit, like, is it worth trading for Baker?
You already have Jared Goff.
You got Jared Goff. So NFC South, I mean, I've heard reports that the Saints are going to keep Jameis.
Yeah,
and
they still have Taysom too. So they have their own conundrum to figure out.
Yeah, the Falcons, unless you get rid of Matt Ryan, it doesn't really make sense to me to go out and get Baker. Like, I don't feel like there's necessarily any upgrade there, even though Matt Ryan's like super old. So, and then obviously the NFC West, all set at quarterback besides Seattle. So, I mean, like, it's just a very limited market of teams that Baker's not big enough of an upgrade to where, like, he puts certain teams in the playoffs that they'd be willing to move off of, like a Tua or a Jameis or somebody like that. But he's got, like, if you're going to get him, like, you got to start thinking about extending him. I don't know. It's just a weird spot where the only teams I could really think would be like the Colts and the Panthers that would be like desperate enough to make a move. So
Panthers are also, I would put Colts 1, Panthers 2.
Yeah.
And in terms of best fit for him, obviously Colts are a better fit. But I forgot about Carolina. Yeah. So those two teams I think are going to be the front runners, and we'll just see how much they're willing to give up, because, Carolina is still trying to address that offensive line, but we know they have. I would say they have better weapons, at least receiving wise, than the Colts. But once again, the Colts better offense. And you're in the AFC South, so you really got to worry about is Tennessee. So maybe quicker way path, less resistance within the division. But we'll have to see where that domino falls. And you mentioned Matt Ryan. He could be moved too, and that could really mess up with what. Mess the Browns' options as opposed, because if he gets moved, then like to one of those two teams, especially Indianapolis, where it's like, well, shoot, now the price went down even further because we only have this team we're talking to. So we'll have to see what happens. But just another number 1 overall pick not working out. Sometimes that happens. So that is the Browns and Baker.